Morena koutou. Nau mai hoki mai ngā community finance performance this morning. Thank you all very much for attending this morning, and to those online, nā mai hara mai. I'll open with our karakia. Whakatakatahau ki te uru, whakatakatahau ki te tonga. Kia mākina kina ki ota, kia mātaratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, te hei Māori ora. Might have some couple of lateness, but otherwise I haven't received any apologies unless anybody else has. Elizabeth Munt, Councillor Reid, Councillor Miller, and Mayor Broughton may be just a little bit late, so we'll carry on. I would like to move. Oh, sorry. There hasn't been any identification of extraordinary business unless somebody has done anything. No. Any conflicts of interest? I haven't received any. They're being done. We'll move on. There is no public forum this morning, and confirmation of the previous minutes, October. Oh, excuse me. Previous minutes. Where are we?
I've got a point for the minutes, please.
Minutes for the extraordinary meeting. 4.2.6. I'm happy to move the confirmation of those minutes. Phil Dean,
I've got a question on the minutes of the meeting. Yep. In the action, public finance and performance points, there's a spreadsheet at the end of the of the minutes. And it says that the investment property report 25/10/23, the action was due on reporting the way forward, and the status says end of year 2023. I'm just after an update on whether we've received that report, if we have, if it can be closed out, and secondly, if we haven't received it, what the new status of that report is.
Thank you, Phil. Good spotting. That's on page 11. You have an update there, with that's just the wrong date.
Bear with me.
Yep.
It's just the wrong date. This financial year.
Good spotting, Phil. It should be end of year 24, so we'll have that updated. Thank you. So I just need a mover and seconder for the minutes. I'm happy to move that. Seconder, Councillor Dean, moved and seconded. Those in favour, say aye. Those against, there being none, declare that moved. That one. What's next? Terms of reference. There's a. Excuse me. Sorry, there's the extraordinary meeting minutes as well, which I'm happy to move and block there if that's accepted. Yes, Sophie. Okay. That's good. Tab 6, committee terms of reference. Everyone's happy with those? Good. Chairperson's report, tab 8, page 23. I'm happy to move my report if I have a seconder. Councillor Miller. Excuse me, Councillor Miller. Those in favour, say aye. Those against, there being none, so moved.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Just thank you for such a comprehensive report. It was good to see the report had addressed other things in the financial space.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. That report has been moved and seconded and carried. We now move on to tab 9, the Chief Financial Officer's report. Thank you, Alison.
I'll take that report as read, but just note within the long-term plan, we have made some significant progress in the module. We've now got the module operating the way it should and on track to get the numbers in the financial strategy out to everyone on Friday.
Councillors, are there any questions or conversation? No, there being none, do I have a mover and a seconder for that report? So moved, Councillor Lyle, and seconded Councillor Sophie McInnes. Those in favour, say aye. Those against, there being none, so moved. Next tab is 11. Organisational CapEx report. Oh, sorry. Sorry, tab 10. I've jumped ahead there. Finance and performance report, Alison.
Thanks. So just by way of intro, Craig will take you through the detail in the report, but just wanted to provide an update. So this report is going to evolve. We are still in our infancy a little bit, wanting to move away from the whole words, narrative, tables, etc., and move into more of a dashboard reporting, and also look at where we're at just now, but where we expect to end at the end of the financial year as well, which will then probably generate some more questions. And I think similarly, not wishing to jump ahead to the organisational CapEx report, that report does look different this time as well, but also just noting that long-term plan work that's going on, we have diluted some of the information with a view to, again, looking at what that report needs to look like to give this committee the information that they need. I'll hand over to Craig just now, who can talk through the key points in the report, and we can take any questions from there.
Try and get close enough so you can hear me. Morning, everyone. So what I'll do is I'll just go through the key highlights of the report, like Alison said. Thank you for that. So the council continues to operate a small surplus to the period ending 31st of January 2024. 12.2 million, that excluding non-cash items, and 3 million also excluding development contribution revenue of 9.7 million. Capital expenditure to the period was 39 million. We're currently in the process of finalising the projected carry forward projects that will be shifted into the long-term plan, and Jen can talk about that a bit more later on. Building consent numbers continue to be lower than expected for the period, but compliance with the 20-day processings continue to improve with 93% compliance, which is good. The cash position at 31st of January was 11.5 million. Thing to note there is that we no longer have any term deposit investments at 31st of January, so it's just a thing to note. And net debt at that time was 124 million with 135 million of LGFA borrowing. Just on the sort of P&L side, so revenue was 3.2 million below budget. That's largely associated with subsidies and grants, revenue being lower, and fees and charges revenue being lower also. The fees and charges revenue is a bit lower, largely due to the building consent fee revenue being lower, and the subsidy and grant revenue is a bit lower because of the timing of Better Off funding associated with the Lincoln Town Centre projects. So I'm just highlighting these key points. On the expenditure side, personnel costs are around about $1 million higher than budget. There's a few reasons for that. There's been position resizing throughout the year compared to what we'd project in our budgets for the year, recruitment of new roles, and there's also a Holiday Act remediation project which is underway, so we've started accruing the costs for that. That report will be talked about later on in the meeting. Overhead expenditure is higher than budget. That's largely associated with insurance costs. So overheads costs are your insurance costs, your electricity and the like. Finance costs are below budget, largely due to the timing of the capital program. And similarly with operating projects, just the timing of those projects being completed. That's sort of the main overview. Have you taken?
I think, Craig, just before we go into the questions, I think just looping back to the comment in May, just on presenting this with the year-end numbers. So it's been very clear around what our year-end position is going to look like. We've got some ups and downs in these numbers. We've potentially got some gaps in our accruals, just in how the invoices are coming through, but that's just adding to what Craig had said. And with regards to holiday.
Councillor Hassan.
Thank you. Just with regards to other expenditures, can you actually give us what that captures? Oh, sorry, that's on page 2974. it's expenditure and you've got other expenditure, and I note there's a deficit, so I just wondered what it actually captures.
So the other expenditure is basically all other expenditure that's not separately disclosed. So it'll be made up of a variety of things. The variance is only sort of 200,000 month to date and positive 400,000 year to date. So I can provide a breakdown of that, but it's not something I have at hand. But it's basically everything else that's not separately disclosed.
Thank you. Councillor Miller?
Subsidies and grants and fees and charges income, is it your expectation that they will catch up by year end, or is that a long term?
Because the projects are looking to be potentially carried forward.
Oh, that recording is naughty.
So given that we're sort of 5 million under budget for our fees and those two items, are those end of year budgets being?
Grant, whilst Craig sorts out his technology, so what we're going to do between now and the next meeting is run through each of the heads of departments in those areas to see where we're actually tracking and to see what is a timing difference and what we will play catch up on between now and year end, and ultimately where that year end variance may lie.
Yep, it's working out.
Because in some respects, well, in every respect, development and financial contributions are actually making that number look better than it is, because that's a pass through. And I've raised this with Alison, and I thought I raised it in a meeting. I question whether we're actually accounting for our development and financial contributions correctly, because I was looking at page 89 of our annual report, and our accounting policy is development and financial contributions are recognised as revenue when the council provides or is able to provide the service for which the contribution was charged. Otherwise, development and financial contributions are recognised as liabilities until such time as the council provides or is able to provide the service. So when I go to the Waimakariri District Council, for instance, and look at their annual report, sure enough, you see the DCs as a liability, and there's certainly a reconcilable account that shows you how it's done, whereas it appears to me that our DC revenue is sitting in the equity portion of our balance sheet, in direct contravention of our policy. So, I'm not putting a stake in the sand saying it's 100% wrong, but it appears to me it's incorrect, and it's being accounted incorrectly. So, while I've raised that in private, I think it's appropriate that it is raised in a public meeting, because it certainly needs addressing to make sure that we are complying with our policy and are actually accounting for it correctly, because it highlights to the governance group that the development contribution sums, which I think we're sitting on about 40 million, is masking our true financial position, which is increasingly weaker than what we anticipated it being. So if we go down to the expenditure line, I'm wondering whether our consultant account, given the troubles we're having, is budgeted to blow out significantly. Is the projections that we've got there around our consultant budget, are they still tenable? Consulting, legal and professional services, currently at 3.48 versus a budget of 3.32. Is that sustainable right to year end at those budgeted levels?
So, Grant, there's a few different questions in there, and yes, you're right, we have spoken about how this is narrated in the annual report. We do need to look at how these are reported. Just now, we are sitting where we are. We do need to look at where we're going to land between now and year end. So with regards to the consultant spend, that is part of that year end position, where we're going to land, and working with the rest of the heads of departments to see where spend is at. But the development contributions one, if we can take that one offline, let's Craig and I work together and come back to the next meeting with a clearer picture on where we're at.
Operating projects, current running an expenditure line, currently running a surplus of 2.37 million. Is that a saving that we can bank rather than spend? Like, was that likely to be spent?
Now, where we're going to be at the end of the year, see what is a temporary timing difference, which may be just now, or whether it is a saving we can bank. I can't answer that question just now, I'm afraid.
Mr. Chair, I've got a number of other questions, but I don't want to hold them. Do you want me to carry on till the end, or do I just come back in later on, let other people have a say?
I'm happy for you to continue, Councillor Miller. That's important that we get these questions.
Still on page 29, first bullet point, personnel costs, $1 million above budget new staff units for the period. Personnel costs are expected. Position resizing and recruitment of new roles. The question I might raise is, should we be recruiting new roles rather than replacement when the LTP has not yet been decided, and there may be pressure from the governance group around our personnel costs? So I would question whether that's a good idea to be doing that. A ratepayer has contacted me, and the question they have raised is when they applied for a job, part of the application inferred that Southern's Council would be paying referral bonuses to staff who refer a person who's employed by STC, and I was unaware whether it's a part of our employment practices. But is any clarity available for that?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that one on the staff referral bonuses. That's not one I'm aware of.
I already asked the question about OPEX, operating expenditure. On page 30, current assets and liabilities, you've got that there. Self-insurance fund of $11.8 million. My understanding is it's sitting in our equity portion or reserves as well. The rationale when that was established was that that would be a liquid cash fund which is on a term deposit. The reason for that was in the earthquakes, what happened, and I think Waimakariri was the example, is that the immediate response from financial institutions was to withdraw lines of credit. And so it was felt that it was prudent to have liquid cash assets such as a term deposit, which could be quickly accessed to have working capital for the business. Having our self-insurance fund in our reserves creates the same problem for us if our financial institution decides to limit or withdraw our lines of credit, we're not able to access it. So I think it's the right thing to do, but I think we need to change the policy or revisit the reason why we set up that fund to explicitly say we're not going to have it in a term deposit. And my personal opinion is that we should put it into the line of credit as well. But as it stands at the moment, it's not there, should be required in the event of an earthquake because it's in reserves.
So I think with the insurance, the self-insurance fund, so we did talk to this last week as well, and decisions were made previously around we would hold that as part of equity. There is steps we can take, and Craig can talk to that in a little bit more detail if required around creating that as an internal borrowing, but we do not have that as liquid cash just now.
I realise that, but I'm saying you're outside policy by the way it's being accounted for at the moment. It's not the way it was set up. So I'm just highlighting that it's incorrect. And if we were to have an emergency event and wanted to access liquid funds, we would not be able to do so, should the bank withdraw a line of credit. And so the reason why it was set up is moot because it doesn't work. So we need to revisit that. So it's got current assets and liabilities. There's no liabilities on there. Where am I supposed to see the liabilities? You've only got assets.
That is a good point. We will remedy that.
Thank you.
No statement of position. So don't know what that is. Mr. Chair, I'll leave my questions there at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Sharon, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Grant, thank you very much for your very valid questions. I think it would be fair to say that we've had some open conversations about the need to be reporting in a different way that separates out operating costs from development contributions. And I think I've stated previously that we are committed to changing how the reports look like so that we show our true operating costs. With regards to some of your questions around the personnel costs, so what do you see coming through there is I think we've spoken to previously around some of the restructure costs was considerably more than was actually budgeted for or understood. So the difference that's coming through is a reflection of the restructure costs and the roles. And I can see the wording around new positions. Those new positions are actually already recruited to, but again, it's the costs associated with the restructure. So we're very mindful of that. If a vacancy does become available, the executive directors and the heads of departments understand that there's the opportunity to review each vacancy as it comes along. To make sure whether we need to replace like for like or whether there needs to be a different opportunity with regards to that role. So that's active every time that we have a vacancy opportunity come up. So in terms of we know what's driving those personnel costs. And again, in terms of consultants, a significant amount of the consultant usage is related to the fact that there are some specialised technical roles or a need at times for specialised technical. We don't need that role permanently, but we need that expertise for a period of time. Sometimes the only way we can do that is to purchase that expertise as a one-off, and part of the executive director teams looking at their operating model is actually about understanding what is the operating model that drives this business forward and what are the roles that we need to help drive this business forward. And that's a piece of work that perhaps hasn't been done before, but is certainly being looked at now, in particularly in those areas within property and infrastructure and property. So acknowledge everything that you're saying, and yes, there is an opportunity to tidy up the reporting and how it's been reported and against our policy. And again, I think that what you're seeing here is reports that have continued on from how we've always reported. And I suspect that we've not been in line with our policy for quite some time. So we understand and appreciate that there is some work to do in that area.
Kia ora, Sharon. Thank you very much, Councillor Dean.
When I was reading through this information over the weekend, I found myself wanting for more information, not in the way of a full set of accounts or anything, but in just some of the themes that were covered in some of the larger dollar value items. There are some big numbers there, and at a time when pressure's coming on council to be frugal, to know what's in those bigger numbers. Now that might be captured in Sharon, what you're just talking about the new way of reporting. And I'm not saying a detailed set of accounts, $1, $2, $3. I'm saying these are the things that are covered under each of those groups. So maybe in your dials or your dashboard, we can do, there'll be a template to explain what each of the dials are. I have another question too.
Alison, have you got you showed me an example of the template. Did you include that in the papers?
It was sent through, but I don't think it's made its way into the papers, unfortunately.
So what we'll do is we will circulate. So we're already working in the background about what a much more explicit performance finance dashboard looks like, and I'll ask Alison to share that with you so that councillors get a sense and feel of what is coming in the future. And it is way more explicit, and it is certainly more detailed and enables, we think, a greater level of understanding for councillors. So Alison, if you could take that as an action to share that outside of this meeting, please.
That's great, Sharon, because that's actually led nicely into, I've got two more questions. One of them is that I find myself in constant need of more financial information based on the conversations we've had over the last 6 months, that I want to know more and deeper on the finances. I don't want the past to repeat itself. I'll just leave it at that. My other question is, Grant, you referred to the policy for self-insurance investment. Do we have a policy around self-insurance and the way it was meant to be invested, or have you just used the word policy as a guide?
It was certainly a resolution at a council meeting as to how that money would be applied and the rationale behind it. I personally didn't agree with it. I'm more of the view that given the strength and backing of local government, that we should be able to have a line of credit which would enable us to access that fund should we need it. But the decision of the council of the day was that they felt there needed to be a liquid fund, which was basically sitting in a term deposit or savings account in cash, which could be accessed at any time. That was the resolution put forward at the meeting at post-earthquake for that funds to be there. And I don't agree with the policy we put in at the time, but that was the resolution of the council of the day.
Well, thanks for that, Grant. Well, I guess that again leads into the comment that I just made there before about what happened yesterday can't happen tomorrow, and that's another example of maybe some of this happening. So,
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Shane. We entirely agree with you, Phil, and that's why we're embarking on the workshops around an investment and disinvestment strategy, so that we framework to be able to utilise for when decisions are made, but also to make sure that the reporting comes back that provides that clarity and transparency at every given time, so that past resolutions don't get lost over time, and that they're kept very live and very real and at forefront of mind, but it's based against good
thank you.
Councillor Glidden.
I $135.2 million, and I know that you've talked about forecasting and seeing where we're going to land. I guess I'm interested if you have any idea where we are actually going to land at the end of financial year, noting that we've got another 5 months to go in this financial year, and are we looking around $10 million per month of what I can see? So that would take us to the limit of around that 190 million.
Today, the current debt position is 145 million, so we've borrowed a further 10 million. Based on sort of draft sort of carry forward numbers and projects going into the LTP, we're probably looking somewhere between 155 and 160 by the end of the financial year, another 10 to 15.
Thank you.
Lydia, just to add to that, in terms of that wider reforecasting piece, that will include the cash position, where we're expecting to land, etc., by in the next report.
Yeah, thank you. I just note today, Minister Pink has asked councils for their building consent and code of compliance certificate timeframes and median timeframes, and we often have our reporting here. I'm just wondering how easy that's going to be able to share that information and thinking through our own reporting on the code compliance stuff. I think if the government's interested in that information, I think we should highlight that for ourselves so that we're aware here what's happening before we start sharing it outside the organisation.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor Miller.
Craig, just I was interested in that end of year debt assumption of 165 million. Does that calculation include the requirement, should you do a project which requires DC funding to be released? Is that including that? Because we're obviously going to have to draw down funds to release our DCs. Is that included in the 165, or is that just the straight CapEx spending, which will take us to 165?
Mainly straight CapEx spending, but in all likelihood, it will be the same number, effectively. So,
because any project that requires DC funding will require us to draw further funds down.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's included in the 165.
Yeah, that's like a very rough projection at this stage. So we're still working on those projections. Yes,
so it's not an extra number because
no, not an extra number.
The debt limit's 220, and I think we've got about 40 mil of DCs in our DC accounts. So you go to 205 if you add that on, if you spend it all in 1 year.
No, it doesn't include that balance. Yeah.
Thank you, councillors. Is there any more questions? Doesn't seem to be any. I guess just sort of as a summary, really, the reporting, thank you very much for the report and the effort and the work that's gone in to produce this heading into the LTP as well. So I do appreciate the effort and the time that is put into the reporting to bring to governance. Certainly highlights the challenges, both inherited and current position moving forward, especially in the OPEX, certainly around insurance. To your point, Councillor Dean, there is a policy on insurance, and that's I-10 in council policies, but it certainly only sort of reflects infrastructure at this point. And if diligent can be please updated with Councillor Miller's points around liability, and then there was the other point around, sorry, there was another something that you were going to send out as to, so maybe if it's captured and updated in a dashboard. I'm confident moving forward. We're walking a very tight line at this point in time, but I think together we are a team, and good to be prudent, but certainly we've got some challenges that we'll all take on together. So do I have a mover and a seconder for this report, or did I already have one? Bob moved and seconder. Somebody? Yep, Councillor, one of those three. Glidden, please. Those in favour say aye. Those against, there being none, so moved. Sharon.
Thank you, Shane. I just want to make a general comment in terms of absolutely this financial year is it's going to be tough, and as will I'm sure the outgoing financial years. But what I wanted to say to councillors is that as we're doing the forecasting, which we committed to doing, and bringing that information back, part of that is, as we're getting towards the year end, what are the discretionary funds that we can and should hold? So I just want you to have a degree of comfort that the executive team understand that as we're progressing through, where there is the ability to hold expenditure that doesn't impact on service delivery, that is very much first and foremost in their minds to help us get to the best year-end position that we can.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Next report, which is organisational projects. Judy, kia ora, morena.
Morena, thank you. I think this report is shifting to where we had it last year. There are a couple of things we're doing. I think firstly, we're talking about organisational expenditure. So last time it was just capital works, but we have a number of OPEX projects and capital projects that contribute to our overall work program, and they all contribute to what would be our carry forward position in any financial year. So we're starting to have an organisational view of all that activity that's going on. So we bring that to the table instead of just the infrastructure property. It doesn't take away that infrastructure property does hold about 90% of the budgets that we do have, but we have a full organisational lens on this now. The other reason for bringing this forward is regardless of how a project is funded, we need to deliver it in a very consistent manner so we can get better practice throughout our organisation and help build better certainty in delivery. So we're treating all projects as projects. The report states, though momentum is building, we are aware that our spend is not at the level that it needs to be, or definitely that we want it to be. We do have a number of challenges. It's a complex mix of internal and external factors, some legacy. We do have short-term and longer-term initiatives or remedies that we can do to get us to a better position. And that's going to really take a whole organisation approach. It's not just one area of our organisation. We need to be working on a number of different things in terms of how we extract and use information to help inform our decision making, how we program, there are a number of aspects which I think are highlighted in the report in terms of where we're going to focus in terms to try and lift our spend performance and get better certainty and delivery. When I helicoptered up and had a look at this report myself, and just the high-level status of the major projects, I think what you can see here is that we do have a number of major projects that are either on hold or delayed, and that is also impacting our ability to spend. Some of those are within our control, and some of those are not at the moment. So the other aspects that I'd just like to highlight is with where we're at with some of those major projects, and the reason why we haven't put a carry forward position in here is that we do have some uncertainty on what's going on with those projects. So we've had delays, but we've got opportunities to get momentum back, and that's created quite a fluid situation to be able to land on a certain number, which is while we're still working through what that number looks like. I mean, we have talked about a number of reasons with this forum in terms of we're understanding where we can do to improve. We've got some really great opportunities. We've got a fresh set of eyes from our ELT who are working as a group to have a look at areas that we can focus on. But what we will do in future reports is we're not going to talk about what's going wrong. We're going to be talking about what we're doing to action it and what we're seeing as a result of that. So we hope that you will start to see that in the numbers and the productivity uplifts that we expect to see from the actions that we plan to take. From going on from the last report, there are a couple of other things I'd like to highlight for you. So we're changing the way that we're going to be categorising projects within our organisation. So traditionally, we've said major projects is anything over 5 million, but what we're looking at now is we're looking at the risk profile of a project. So sometimes we can have projects that are low spend, but are actually quite risky for our organisation, and we need that governance and level of oversight on those. So, and the report outlines how we plan to do that, and we will be transitioning to that model over the upcoming months. So what that will mean is that some of the major projects that you start seeing in this report may not just be infrastructure property projects. We'll have other projects that will be relevant for you to have oversight of. The other point that I'd like to make is our Better Off funding program. So that is still in progress, which is great. We have completed one of the initiatives, which is the Leeston Health Facility feasibility study, and that has been provided to the Friends of Ellesmere Hospital, who are currently looking at what they would like to bring back to council with regards to the outcomes that they found in that report. The Department of Internal Affairs, DIA, have signalled potential changes with the Better Off funding, and moving forward, they're going to be referring to it as local water well done. We don't really have anything further on that at the moment. It's just really signalling that they may change how they wish to focus the money that they're providing council in that area, not necessarily take it away, which I think is a gist that we've taken from that. And in terms of assurance activity, we are due to do another post-implementation review. We will look at focusing that on a project from outside of infrastructure property. We've done quite a lot of work in that area, and I think it's an opportunity for us to look at how we're delivering across other aspects of our organisation. And I think as a summary.
Kia ora, Jenny. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm just going to add a little bit more to the narrative in terms of just thank you for pointing out. So we're reporting all projects in the organisation now. One of the challenges we have found is that the reports were taking place also at different times and different points in time. So the capital projects infrastructure report was out of kilter with the financial report. So what we're doing is aligning those two reports so that we've got the same timeline and we've not got alternate timelines, because then what's happening is we found we were ending up with different reports and bringing a report about capital projects, one to finance and one to the infrastructure, that were telling quite different messages, and that's because the timeframes were different. So we're going to stop having two separate reports. We're now moving to one report within one time frame. So we've got that absolute clarity. In terms of the specifically some of the individual projects, I'll speak to the Rolleston Town Centre development, and you can see that that's overall in red. The developers will be coming to, I think we're due a workshop where the developers will be coming to provide an update. We sort of felt it'd been quite some time since they'd been, so Tim has that in hand, and some further discussion around the opportunities there with regards to the town centre, and some of that is driven by market challenges and a general downturn, the fiscal downturn across the country. And obviously Whatarau is going out as part of the long-term plan, so we've put that on hold, so that's pretty obvious. And obviously we're just working through some of the consenting related to Ellesmere to Pines pipelines, but we're reasonably confident that we will have a way forward, and whilst not able to deliver the as much of the programme before the 30th of June, we should, I hope, in the next month have some clarity about what will and what we can deliver and what will need to be carried forward.
Thank you, Sharon. Councillor Munt.
Thanks, Jenny, for explaining with the DIA. I just wanted to quantify it a little bit more. So from the Better Off funding, there was tranche 1, 2 and 3, correct? Where we just paid 1, is that how it went, and then 2 and 3 were stalled? So from what you've explained here, 2 and 3 tranche will potentially be coming forward as per the original Better Off funding packages, but this time instead of being used for external other additional projects, that money will be put onto water infrastructure and the like. Is that correct?
What I have in the report refers to tranche 1, so unspent money in tranche 1.
Right.
Tranche 2 and 3, I'll have to find out. I'm not unsure of the position of what's happening with those.
So in terms of the unspent money for tranche 1, we've set that money aside for things like Lincoln Town Centre upgrade, and the things that you've got here that are down as in progress. So those things, that money's allocated to but hasn't been spent, so that's not money that now needs to be spent on water infrastructure. That still remains where we originally allocated it.
We've done some risk analysis around this. Sharon asked us to have a look at if there's changes that they're suggesting come into effect, how would that impact our projects? We expect minimal, because a lot of our work is associated with the alignment of where they're looking to put the funding. So what we could do, for example, with the Lincoln Town Centre, if we were asked to reprioritise the funding, we could put that into water infrastructure elements of that project. It wouldn't slow it down necessarily.
Just to be clear, that those changes haven't come into effect yet. So they've just been signalled, but nothing's actually happened. But we have got ways of spending the money on the same project, but just identifying it slightly differently to meet the changes if they do occur.
Right. Okay. So the indication from the government is they want the money spent on water infrastructure, but we're saying it potentially won't all be spent on water infrastructure because we've already set the money aside for the other projects. So how do we balance that?
Sorry, I'm going to answer that. In terms of the, as part of the new government settling in and looking at some of the funds that have been distributed, a question has been asked around for the Better Off funding, have the funds been utilised? Where are councils at with the funds? I think it would be fairly well, it would be reasonable to say that Selwyn has got those funds allocated with the intent to spend, so I'm not unduly concerned about our position. I think that would differ for other councils around the country who don't necessarily have those funds fully allocated. And I understand that there is the potential that the Department of Internal Affairs may seek to have discussion with councils that do not have those funds fully allocated or spent. but I'm not so concerned about our position. Jenny and the team did some great work around assessing where we were at the risk, but we just wanted to just be upfront and say that that was a question that had been asked, and we're reasonably comfortable with our position.
Thank you, Sharon. Councillor Reid.
Thanks for that. There's been quite a bit of clarification because there were some questions I was going to ask. So it was good to hear, Jenny, about going forward and what is this report, that the questions that I was going to ask really probably need to go to the next committee meeting, which is in a couple of weeks anyway. So I'll ask them then. I did have a question around the Rolleston Town Centre development. So I guess I'll wait and see what's happening with that. So thank you, Sharon, for that. Darfield Pool refurbishment, just a question on the comment there. So should that be completed full stop and then in defects period as opposed to completed in defects period? Thanks, sorry.
Councillor Dean.
Well, I guess I'm not quite going to put my questions about Rolleston Town Centre onto the next meeting, so I'm going to ask some now, if that's okay. They are financial questions. No, Lucy Farron around finance. Okay, so my questions are, the developers delaying, my concern is that $26.34 million that is outlined there. If they delay further, is that number likely to go up? That's question number one. Is there a provision for the developer to actually come back at us and say just that question there, or can we tie them in to say that's what the contracted amount is? And second one is, at what point do we start looking at our out options for that sort of thing when it's been delayed by the contractor on what looks like financial reasons? Yeah. And then I have a supplementary question depending on how those ones are answered.
Well, maybe I could start. The first part of it was the financial one. The budget may go up. I guess they are facing fairly tough times.
Sorry, actually, I'm going to chip in there. We have some commercial sensitivity here. And so I just want to be really careful about what we do say in terms of dollar figures, because these contracts are commercial contracts. And I think that that's probably why we want to bring the developers to come and have an open a conversation with council that will be in a public excluded
I'm happy to
position.
refer this to, I'm happy to put this in public excluded, but can we discuss it today in public excluded?
Yes, most certainly.
Yep. Okay. Well, I'll defer all my questions until then.
Thank you, Councillor Glidden.
My question is around the Darfield Pool refurbishment and the cost, noting that we were $200,000 over budget. What is the benchmark measure for the difference between a green light and a yellow light?
I suppose sorry. Lydia, that's a good point. I sort of put that on the report to show that it's closed out now. So technically I wouldn't really report on that any further. But if we were 200,000 over, we should really technically have that as a yellow. But it's the way I sort of focus the report to have it as a closeout item just for continuity. So
yeah, cool.
That's a fair point.
Yeah. I mean, I find it interesting going forward about how we've delivered and if we've been over budget or on target and whatnot. But sure. I really like what you've done with this reporting. So thank you.
Yeah, that's good feedback. Thank you. We'll take it on board.
Thank you, Councillor Hassan.
Okay, where do I start? Let's start with page 35, 74. And I'm going to mention projects that I do know. We've got Kakaha Park Development Stage 2 at 15.8 million. We had Stage 1 that has been completed, I believe at a cost of 17 million. So adding that up, we come to a total of $32.8 million. And my assumption would be that that would be a majority of DC funded project, given that it was a capital project from a greenfield site. And then we have also sitting there Whataroa and Leeston Park at a proposed 25.5 million, right? And you start adding these totals up, and we're up around over 50 million. And we've got a total DC account sitting there of 40 million. I know you're going to bring back the breakdown of the DCs, but, and then you've got on track green lights. And I know you're going to bring back the risk assessment, but adding some of these up, there's some of these projects up that we've got here, not completed, some not started, and we can't gauge them across our DC account. So as to whether we've got enough financial funds just sitting as a build-up and how much we're going to have to borrow to actually fulfill some of these projects. So I'm just highlighting that I'm looking forward to a report coming back to us with a breakdown with regards to these particular projects in whole against our DCs. So am I on the right track here? That's my question with regards to my understanding.
Deborah, I'll answer that just now rather than passing it over to Jen or Tim. So the development contribution report, we have obviously submitted that pie chart that we done a few weeks back. We do need to break that down. We need to break it down at component level to see what we have collected, when we've collected it, and what we have actually used those development contributions for. Secondly, the next part is looking at the future around the carryover projects, the projects that's in going into the long-term plan, around how these are funded. We obviously need to loan fund some things first until such times we collect, but it's just that visibility around what we have done in the past and what we're actually looking to do in the future, and that'll be the reporting that we're developing.
Okay, I'll look forward to that report with regards to that, but it's just I guess the fact that we've committed some of these DC fundings and we obviously haven't progressed, the projects.
Yeah.
And I guess when you're looking at forward funding some of these, there's always an interest component. Who ends up paying the interest component?
Just for completeness, in terms of what I've mentioned around what we are going to be reporting on, is that everything from your standpoint around you're expecting to see, or are we missing anything? Because what I'd like to do is sort of develop this report with feedback to make sure it is capturing everything. So from what I've said, is that covering everything that you're looking for?
These are sort of like, I guess, the larger projects. I guess also the cumulative effect of the smaller projects that are under 5 million would be very helpful as well.
Okay.
Because they also have an impact on the financials. So I don't know how far you want to go down, but I think it's important to report on the cumulative effect of those under that 5 million reporting.
Thank you, Councillor Hassan. Sharon?
Thank you, Shane. What I would say is that Alison will be working with Shane as chair and I think Grant as deputy around our reports going forward and what that looks like on our dashboard. So I think it's really important that we don't end up with everybody's absolute desires in a report, but actually to feed in through Grant and Shane, who will be working with Alison to make sure that we shape the reports. And Deborah, we're very appreciative and acknowledge around the development contributions, and Alison has certainly got that clear in her mind around a future reporting as well.
Good. Thank you. Megan.
Yeah. Kia ora. I did have a question on the development contributions as well, and reporting on them after now being really familiar with the policy and the 10-year time frame around it. And the information that I could get from the website was just development contributions as of July 2023. And all I would want to know from a governance perspective, what are we at risk of losing by not progressing? But in terms of my, now that's been answered, I had a question around page 35, the table on page 35, I like dashboard reporting, so thank you for that. Now, given that this is the Finance and Performance Committee, sometimes I do get a bit confused about whether we should be talking about some of these projects in some of the other committees, but this is about performance. So are we on target, and what are the risks? And when I look at the individual projects, what I found difficult to understand on reporting is in the annual plan, we report on significant capital projects, and that's defined as anything that's identified as having a budget over 500,000. But then over here, we're looking at anything over 5 million or high risk. And I just wanted to have somehow some confirmation that the rest is working as well. So I'm not quite sure about the level of reporting, which committee it goes to.
Aye.
But when I'm looking at the annual plan and that what we're reporting out to the community, it's slightly different than what we're talking about performance here.
Good on, Megan. Sharon?
Yeah, thank you, Megan. And that's a good point. And that's what I was referencing before, is that we've had different reports going to different committees, but reporting back on different timeframes. Actually, one report will come here that covers off the financial and the performance. And again, I suspect that you're absolutely right. We are out of kilter with some of the policies or statements that are within the annual plan, and this is part of our resetting and making sure that we're reporting back what we said we were going to report back.
Councillor Miller.
I guess what's fresh in my mind, I agree with Megan, that we're here to analyse procurement efficiency, and it's a wee bit of a tone, and I've been guilty of it as well, of blaming the staff for the projects. The staff didn't initiate the projects, we did. They're just delivering them. Perhaps the efficiency is not as good as high as we'd like, but we're the people who voted for them to happen. And I think what I wanted to say to Jenny was on page 32, it was one of the best paragraphs I've read for a long time, particularly the second half of it, which I'll just repeat. This perspective is valuable for identifying inefficiencies, legacy issues, opportunities. What is apparent is that the work program is overly complex with close to 900 budget line items, and an immediate reset is required if we're to start addressing legacy issues before we transition to the next LTP. Great paragraph, Jenny. I would vote for you for president. You wrote that. Because in a nutshell, that addresses where we are. And I think it aligns with the things that I think particularly myself and Lydia have been saying, that we'd like to see that in this year's LTP around addressing those legacy issues and 900 budgeted line items to see whether they're still current, what we can and can't trim to make our LTP more manageable as a business. So great paragraph, and compliments to you for that. On page 33, it's just a wee bugbear, I suppose. Council is committed to meeting spend targets. If I was a consumer or a ratepayer, I would say that appears like we've got to get out and spend more, whereas I think what we're saying is committed to meeting capital delivery, yes, procurement efficiency, rather than meeting spend targets, because a spend target, from my view, is to try and minimise spend for maximum capital delivery. So it's minor, but I think it's just the language we're using. So thank you for that. Thanks for that paragraph. It excited me no end.
Very good. Councillor Miller. Sharon, you have your light on.
I'm really delighted we've excited Grant today. That's awesome. We'll try and do that every meeting. Look, I think that, and again, you know, we've had a number of conversations across a number of committees, and I think there has been a desire to run lots of different projects and probably have slightly rose-coloured glasses in the past about what we could actually deliver. We have taken a much more pragmatic approach in this current LTP. And again, but that's reflective of what you've heard from the community too, about it isn't so much about facilities. So the number of big ticket facility items in this LTP is considerably less than previous. One of the things that Tim Mason has done is actually going through in detail. So I think we've got this raft of projects sitting there, and And in between now and the final LTP, there is a look and see around some of those projects. And I use the term, are they real or are they not real? And I think we've had an open discussion about this before, is that there are some projects that have perhaps sat there on the list that if they've sat there for 10 years and they've not been delivered, well, then they're not a real project. And that we need to be removing them. That has never been done before, that we have systematically gone through what is a large list. So we will be endeavouring to do that between now and the final LTP. But all I can do is give some reassurance that we're not going out with the same level of builds that council has been doing previously. Because we also recognise that we've got a degree of carry forward, and our intent in outgoing years is to actually have a realistic capital programme that is prioritised. And I think we will have some slides at some, possibly even in the financial strategy paper or presentation next week, that shows that the vast amount of our capital delivery is focused on roads and water, and actually surprisingly there's not that much focused on community. So it'll be really good to be able to put that slide up for councillors to see where the projects that are being delivered are focused and what some would say would be core business.
Sure, Sharon, thank you very much. Yes, and thank you, councillors, for your robust conversations and questions. I think certainly thank you very much, Jenny and team, for bringing this report through. It certainly signals the sort of spaghetti junction of overlap of committees, different various streams of information, and the dilution or segregation of that as we move forward. Clearly in a transition that's affordable and realistic, and also moving through some of those legacy issues, inefficiencies, and what are the opportunities out of that. With regards to the capital expenditure program and table on page 35, could there be consideration given to types of projects within that? There's the reserves, and then there's wastewater treatment, and then there's the community facilities. So just a bit of feedback there on that, but certainly the questions that have been raised from councillors certainly signal, as Grant Miller's mentioned, that councillors, at the end of the day, we get what we ask for through feedback from our community, and certainly any delay in projects leads us to where we land today. And there's a couple of projects on there that certainly have increased due to the compassion, I guess, of consultation. And so maybe consideration moving forward around what is appropriate consultation moving forward on a project, having been through a consultation process and then adopting it needs consideration at this long-term plan. So do we have a mover and a seconder for the report? Yep, Councillor Deputy Mayor Lyle and Phil Dean. Oh, sorry. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against, there being none, so moved. Tab 12, is it? Official information complaints. Who's reporting on that?
I am, Mr. Chair. Look, this is just included for your information. There's a couple of attachments that you'll see links to on Appendix 1, and this details the Lagoima requests across the country. The first one is for those complaints that have been received, and the second spreadsheet is for those that have been completed. So just included for your information. I think in case of Selwyn, I think there's one item that's included on one of the spreadsheets, but other than that, it's just of interest to see the breadth and range of Lagoima requests across the country.
Thank you very much, Tim. Sharon?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Tim. And I'll just add on to that. So again, this is a new report that we committed to bringing through to council. I don't think you've had oversight of the Chief Ombudsman's report previously. So he sends out 2 reports a year. And I think it's really important as governors that you get to see this report, because it gives you a sense and feel around where Selwyn sits against the rest of the country. And in terms of, it also raises where a complaint has gone to the Ombudsman about our response to a Lagoima. And what Tim is referencing is one individual did make a complaint, and their complaint was not upheld. So in terms of the Chief Ombudsman was very happy how we had responded to the Lagoima and the information that we had released. So again, part of that performance, you will see this report come twice a year, and I'm really pleased that we're bringing this level of visibility. What we are aiming to do, and I don't know that we've might be saying something that I haven't quite relayed to the team yet, but I think we've incorporated Lagoimas into our KPIs, or possibly not, in terms of making sure we're quite clear in our annual reports, I think, going forward. So we haven't always been really clear about our Lagoimas. And I would say that when we have our new legal person in place permanently, that is an area of focus we do need to have within the organisation, not only from a staff or team perspective, but also starting from governance down, because I'm not sure whether you as a set of governors have had any specific training around Lagoima. And having been previously through a best practice review with the Ombudsman, it's really important for governance to understand the Lagoima and all that is involved in that, and about the importance of transparency through the organisation.
Thank you, Sharon. Councillor Miller.
Thanks for creating the report. I just, on my initial reading at it, and I think it'd be a good idea for the next one, is that we should mine the Selwyn data out rather than just having a link. It didn't seem to make much sense that when you have links, it tends to indicate you're trying to hide stuff. And I think if we've got nothing to hide, why don't we just mine the Selwyn data out, put it in there?
Councillor Hassan.
Just with regards to the Lagoima reporting, and I don't know whether this is the correct forum to bring it up, but do we still have MFE reporting? Like they used to actually provide annual reports, and if we're still involved in having to supply reports to MFA, I think it's important that we understand where we actually sit legally with that reporting as well, because that seems to have lapsed over a long period of time.
Tim?
Yeah, we're still required to report on a range of RMA functions. And Bob, do you report those, or they have been reported in the past, but if they've slipped off the list, we can certainly get them back on?
Yeah, we've been reporting those on an annual basis, so we haven't slipped off at all.
Thank you. Councillor McInnes.
Yeah, it's kind of a side question really around the Lagoimas. On our website, we've got a page that lists some recent Lagoima requests, and the most recent one that's on there is the 18th of December 2019. So obviously that's slipped off at some point. It's not really an urgent one, but at the same time, I feel like it's a transparency thing. If people are asking questions, a lot of it's around quarries, and it's information that actually quite a few people would be interested to know. So how do we make sure that they actually can look for it without doing multiple duplicates?
Yep, and
please.
Sorry, I just jumped in there. You're absolutely right, and that's part of needing to refocus how we are doing Lagoimas. In terms of our response, it's our response time to Lagoimas. That's what I got confused with before. That's what we're reporting on. So our response time is really good to a turnaround time for Lagoimas. What we need some guidelines to make sure that Lagoimas that are appropriate for everybody to be aware of are released and how they're released. And at the moment, we don't have those up-to-date guidelines. So again, that's a piece of quality improvement work that we'll be looking for from our new head of legal services when they get their feet under the table.
Thank you, councillors. So just for confirmation, sorry, Grant, I kept you off there, ensuring that future reports, the Selwyn specific information will be pulled out. Thank you. I have a mover and a seconder for that report. Councillor Hassan and Bob. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against, there being none, so moved. Thank you. Resolution to exclude the public. moving the public excluded part of the meeting. Councillor Lyle and Councillor Miller. In favour, say aye. Aye. Those against, so moved.